Imagine standing on the edge of a jagged cliff with nothing but 15-hand mixed bottles of herbal lotion and a debt that could swallow you whole. The wind is howling, the rain is lashing against the windows of a tiny, damp shop in Brighton, England, and the world is waiting for you to break. It is 1976. The air smells of salt, stale cigarettes, and the suffocating scent of desperation. You are a mother of two. Your husband is halfway across the world on a suicidal horse trek from Buenos Aires to New York, and your bank account is sitting at a cold, hard zero. This isn't a story about soap. This is a tactical breakdown of how one woman used raw discipline and ethical warfare to dismantle a multi-billion-dollar industry that was built on lies and vanity. They called it a business. I call it a revolution. Welcome to a realm where we strip away the corporate fluff to find the brutal truth of what it takes to rise from the abyss. Anita Roddick didn't just sell moisturizer. She sold a middle finger to the giants of the beauty world. She looked at the skyscrapers of London and New York, those cathedrals of commerce built on making women feel inadequate, and she decided to burn their philosophy to the ground. But before the glory, there was the grind. Before the empire, there was the suffocating pressure of being an outsider. Think about the sheer weight of that pressure, that crushing sensation in your chest, when you realize that if you fail, your children do not eat. That is where the alpha is born, in the isolation of the struggle. Anita didn't have a marketing budget. She didn't have fancy packaging or a PR firm whispering in her ear. She had the heavy weight of survival and the discipline to make every single penny scream. She looked at the beauty industry and saw a void. A soul-sucking vacuum of plastic bottles and chemical promises that told women they weren't enough. Anita saw that void, and she prepared to fill it with the truth. But the truth is expensive. The truth is dangerous. As she stood in that small, dimly lit shop on the first morning, the silence was deafening. She had no money to buy more bottles. She had no money for labels. She was standing in the center of a storm with no umbrella, staring at a shelf of 15 green bottles that represented her entire life's gamble. And then, in that moment of absolute crisis, came the spark. Not a stroke of luck, but a bold, calculated decision that would change the face of retail forever. She realized that if she couldn't afford new bottles, she would have to force the world to change its habits. She would make them bring the bottles back. It wasn't green marketing. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was strategic survival. She took a thick black marker, her hands trembling with a mix of exhaustion and defiance, and wrote a word on a piece of cardboard that would become a manifesto. Refill. She stopped asking for permission from the banks. She stopped begging for validation from the industry elites. The tone of her life shifted in that heartbeat from the whimpering of a victim to the cold, calculated power of a commander. She was no longer just a shopkeeper. She was a warrior preparing for a siege. And as the first customer walked toward that door, Anita realized she wasn't just selling a product, she was starting a fire. But fires have a way of spreading, and the giants she was about to offend were already starting to notice the smoke rising from Brighton, and they were coming to put it out. The giants didn't send a formal declaration of war. They sent the vultures first. You see, when you challenge a multi-billion-dollar machine, it doesn't just ignore you. It tries to suffocate you in the cradle. While Anita was scrubbing the floors of her tiny shop with vinegar and water because she couldn't afford industrial cleaners, the local establishment began to tighten the noose. 2 funeral directors from the neighboring businesses marched into her shop, faces contorted with disgust. They claimed the name The Body Shop was a desecration of the dead. They threatened legal action. They wanted her gone. This is the moment where most people fold. The pressure builds in your temples, your throat tightens, and that voice in the back of your head screams, "I told you so." You're just a housewife playing at business. Give up. But Anita didn't have the luxury of a retreat. She had 2 mouths to feed and a husband chasing ghosts in the Andes. She looked at those men, representatives of a stale, rigid patriarchy, and she realized something profound. Conflict isn't a barrier. Conflict is content. Instead of hiring a lawyer she couldn't afford, she picked up the phone and called the local newspaper. She didn't play the victim. She played the rebel. She told them she was a young mother being bullied by the men in black simply for trying to provide for her family. The next day, she wasn't just a shop owner, she was a folk hero. This is the first rule of the alpha strategist when they try to bury you. Use the dirt they throw to build a mount. She turned a legal threat into free marketing that money couldn't buy. People didn't just come for the lotion anymore, they came to see the woman who refused to flinch. But the real war wasn't in the newspapers. It was in the psychology of the sale. Every other beauty brand in 1976 was selling a LIE. They were selling the promise that if you used their cream, you would look like a 19-year-old Swedish model. They sold insecurity. Anita looked at the green-tinted walls of her shop, a color she chose only because it was the only paint cheap enough to cover the damp patches, and she decided to sell the truth. She realized that the most powerful weapon in any market is authenticity. While the giants spent millions on airbrushed advertisements, Anita was busy hand-writing the ingredients on every single bottle. She told her customers exactly what was inside pineapple, cocoa butter, mud. No magic, no miracles, just raw, honest ingredients. This was a tactical strike against the very foundation of the beauty industry. She wasn't just selling a product, she was creating a tribal identity. She began to train her staff not as sales clerks, but as activists. She didn't want them to push products, she wanted them to educate. Don't tell them it will make them look younger, she barked. Tell them it will make their skin feel alive. This is where the strategy shifts from survival to domination. By refusing to lie, she made every other brand look like a deceiver. She turned her poverty into a badge of honor. The cheap plastic bottles, that wasn't a lack of funds, that was a commitment to the environment. The lack of outer packaging, that was reducing waste. She was weaponizing her constraints. She was the commander of an army of two, operating out of a damp room in Brighton, but she was thinking 3 moves ahead of the CEOs in their glass towers. She understood that a brand built on a mission is 10 times more dangerous than a brand built on a margin. But as the queues began to stretch down the street, and the scent of peppermint and orange oil began to waft through the salty Brighton air, a new shadow began to loom. Success has a price. And for Anita, that price was about to be paid in the form of a massive, systematic attempt by the global conglomerates to buy her soul or crush it under the weight of a hostile takeover. The smoke was no longer just a signal, it was a beacon for the predators who were now circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What is the one lie in your industry or your life that you are finally ready to expose? What is the refill revolution you are about to start? I want to hear your story. I want to know about the moments you chose to fight instead of fold. Send your thoughts, your struggles, and your victories to me at vodokvietny12@gmail.com. The giants are watching. The world is waiting. It's time to stop asking for permission and start causing a revolution. Rise up.